In this video, we're going to talk a little bit about the contents of a cell, the value of a cell, and the formatting for a cell, because those are all slightly different things. And it's very confusing for people who have never worked with worksheets before. So I'm going to go to cell D2, and the first thing I'm going to do, because it's going to come up later, is I'm going to make that cell a little bit wider. So I actually make the entire column wider. So I'm going to take column D, I'm going to take my mouse up here, I'm going to drag it to the right, and now we've got a really big cell. So we can put really big things in there. But I'm not going to put something big in there. I'm just going to type in a number. I'm going to type in 12,345.678. All right, so now I've put that into the cell. If I go back up to cell D2 again, we can see the contents of the cell up here in the formula bar. And we now have a number, that is a number, 12,345.678 in that cell. That is both the value and the contents of the cell. Later on, I'll show you where the value and the contents might be different, and then we'll talk about the terminology. But the first thing I want to show you is that there's different ways of formatting that. And so if we look up to the ribbon, and you'll see this is the formatting area, this is formatting as general right now. And if I click this on, I can say, hey, let's make it look like currency. And when I click on the currency, it did three things. It put in the comma, it put in the dollar sign in front, and you'll notice now it doesn't say 0.678, it says 0.68. And that's because we're used to working in cents and dollars, and there's no such thing as a fraction of a cent in this. But if you look at the value of the cell up here, okay, the value is still 12345.678. It's just not displaying everything. It's choosing a different way of displaying that value. Okay, so that is very interesting. Now, if I want to say, hey, I would like to see more decimal places, I can click on this button right here and say, oh, show me more decimal places, please. Thank you very much. Or maybe I'm so rich, I don't care about pennies. So I'm going to get rid of all of these. And now it's actually going to say I have $12,346. So we can adjust how many things are displayed, but it's important to remember that the value of the cell itself, when I go back and look at it, it does have all the precision there. It's just changing how it's displayed on the screen. Okay, if I don't want to display it with the dollar sign, I can just say comma format, for example, and we have a very similar view, but it just doesn't show the dollar sign. If I go back to just general, it will display all the information it can. So that's an example of how to display numbers. I can also represent numbers as a percentage. So if I click on the percentage button, it now actually multiplied it by 100. But I'm going to go back and just say, you know what, this is just a number. Okay, and I can control how many decimal places I want to see. So that is a difference between formatting and the contents of a cell. Now earlier I used the terminology contents and value. And this is an important distinction that I want to make right now, because the contents of the cell may be more than just a simple value. I just typed in a number right here, 12345.678. I could type in something more complicated. So let's do something slightly more complicated. Instead of just typing in a value directly, I'm going to enter a formula. So to do that, all formulas in Excel begin with the equal sign. And then all I'm going to do is add 1 to it. And I'm going to hit enter. And now we can see what's happening here. I'll add a bit more precision just so we can see what's going on. So if I look at the formula bar up at top, you can see the actual formula I entered. It's still there, 12345.678 plus 1. But what gets displayed is the actual value. So all formulas get resolved to a value, and then it's that value that is actually displayed. And so once again, I could format this as a dollar sign or a number or as a percent or however I want to display it. All right, but the displayed value is different than the actual contents of the cell. So now we can introduce all three concepts together. We have the actual contents of the cell, which may be a formula. And then we have the resultant value, which is produced by that formula. And then we actually have the formatting of how it's actually displayed in the cell. So all three of those have to work together and may be slightly different. And so that is confusing for people when you first learn Excel. after a while, it will become second nature. Now I'm going to show you something a little bit more bizarre. I'm going to take that cell, and instead of saying, hey, it's a number, I'm going to say, hey, it's not a number, it's a date. Where did Thursday, October 19th, 1933 come from? Well, you don't need to know this, but Excel keeps track of dates as the number of days since January 1st, 1900. So if you go back to 1900 and you start counting days, if you go 12,346 days from January 1st, 1900, you'll end up at Thursday, October 19th, 1933. And the fractional part of the number is actually the time. So Excel thinks that the time is 4:16:19 p.m. All right, so again, if we look at the contents of the cell, it's still a formula. But now it produces a value, and Excel is going to interpret that value according to how we formatted it. So we can go back to date, or if we say, nope, that was not a date, that was actually a number. There we go. So that really drives home the concept that we have three separate things. So the last thing I want to talk about is a value. For the most part, when people think about values, they mean numbers, but there are a few different types of values in Excel. We've already seen date values and time values. Those are very special values that Excel still represents as a number. And if you remember the module on digital information, everything can be reduced down to a number, whether it's a date, or even, if you recall, we can actually enter text. And so in Excel, if I enter text, if I say hello there, and I just want to shout it out at you, hello there, that is also a value. Okay, so you can have values that aren't just numbers. This just happens to be a text value. In Excel, they're called labels. There's one other type of value I just want to point out, and that's if I type in true, that is now a Boolean value. And we can also have false as well. So there's basically four different types in Excel of values. We have number values, which is what we're going to be using for the most part, but we also have text values, which are called labels. We also have date and time values, and we also have Boolean values. So now we've had a bit of a comprehensive view of the differences between the contents of a cell, the value of the cell, and the formatting of the cell.